Hey everyone, this is Ryan Mance. Hopefully everyone's having a good week and getting a lot of shooting opportunities and finding success out there. In this video, I wanted to show everyone how I set up the Canon 7D Mark II to do dual autofocus buttons. And I shared a similar technique about a month ago for Sony cameras, and so I figure now's the time to show you how to do it with the newer Canon cameras. So like I said, this is the 7D Mark II, and I believe you can do a similar setting for any of the cameras that are aimed towards the semi-pro or pro users that were released after the 7D Mark II. And so let's get started. I'll show you how to do it here. Like most cameras that come straight out of the box, the shutter button is also going to activate autofocus, and then on the back of these cameras there's going to be a dedicated autofocusing button, and then next to that there's an exposure lock button. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to customize the exposure lock button so that it also acts as an autofocusing button. The difference between these two is going to be that the autofocus button is going to control one focusing area, and then by simply coming over here and pressing this button right next to it, you're going to activate a separate autofocusing area. And before we get started on that, first thing we're going to do is unmap the shutter button so that it no longer activates autofocus. And a lot of people refer to that as back button focusing. And it's super simple to do. So let's get started on that. Now there's a couple ways you can get to the settings where we're going to be changing everything. The first way is through the menu, and you're going to go over to the Custom Controls tab, and then you're going to page over to Custom Controls on the bottom here. And the other way to do it is to simply hit the Q button, and then you're going to go over to Custom Controls. So inside Custom Controls here, you can see that there's the shutter button, there's the AF on button, and there's the exposure lock button. And so what we're going to do is first control for the shutter button. We're going to go in here, and we're just going to change that so it's metering start instead of metering and autofocus start. So now that we unlinked the shutter button from the autofocusing, we're going to go down to AF on, and we see that metering and autofocus start. Yep, that's what we want to start with. And then we're going to go down to the exposure lock button, and we're going to change that from exposure lock to metering and autofocus start as well. Alright, so we took care of the first part, which is unlinking the shutter button from autofocus start. And we've also replaced the exposure lock with autofocusing. And the second part of this step is going to be we're going to go back in here and we're going to go to this little hidden menu, which is detail settings if you hit the info button. Oh, well, look at that. And so here you can go down to AF area selection mode. And here you can set which autofocusing area you want mapped to this button directly. And so you can set this to the large zone, for example. And we'll go back and we can have this AF on button either set to the hash mark, which is just maintain current setting. So it's going to work through the menus like you've always done. And it's just going to use whatever you set up that way. Otherwise, you can also set it up to do its own autofocusing area. So you can set this one to 1 point, for example, and it'll always be 1 point when you hit the on button. And then it's always going to be the wide zone if you hit the exposure, or what was the exposure button. And where I think this customization becomes really powerful is when you use it in conjunction with the custom shooting modes. So the C1, C2, and C3 that you're going to find on the top of dial here. And so for C1, for example, I usually use that for birds in flight. And so I'll have the AF on button registered to be the center point plus the 4 surrounding points. And then for what was the exposure button is now autofocusing, and the mode's going to be set to the wide AF area. And that works nice for when you have multiple birds in the frame and you're not actually just trying to track the one. And then for C2, I use that for kind of like my standard shooting setting. And so I have that with the 1 point for the AF on, and then I have the 1 point surround for the exposure button. And then for C3, I have that for my fast action. And that's pretty much the same. It's just the only differences are going to be the shutter speed is going to be set higher. So hopefully this video gave you a few ideas on how you can set up the Canon cameras so you can switch autofocus modes much faster because you're just a button away instead of either having to flip this lever or go into the menu. And so if you didn't notice in the custom controls menu when you're setting these buttons up, in the detail settings there are other things you can do. So you can change it so it's always going to activate AI servo or the continuous autofocusing, or you can have it always do one shot, or you can just be able to switch it as you want so it's not actually mapped to any one specific autofocusing mode. Alright, thank you so much for watching. That's going to be it for now. Hopefully you learned a new trick with your Canon camera, and if you like this video and want to see more like it, I hope you subscribe. See you next time.